When we last left Clytemnestra, she was standing with her hands soaked in blood and telling the old men of Argos that she didn't regret a thing. We are now going to gallop on to the thrilling part 2 of the Oresteia in our quest to figure out what to do about blood guilt. This is Young Heretics. It's the classical education you didn't know you were missing. We've been talking this week and last week about this ancient impulse to avenge the sins of history with your own hands, and how that always terribly goes wrong because we are all implicated in the sins of history and the sinfulness of the world, and getting more blood on our hands only makes things worse. And so when we left Clytemnestra, the wife of Agamemnon, she had just murdered both him and Cassandra, his consort from Troy, and I mentioned that their son was now going to be wrapped up in this cycle of retribution and violence, because that's what happens. You think that you're ending the cycle by doing the one thing that you know is just and right, but of course all you've done is perpetuate the cycle, and so that's the subject of the coephori, or the libation bearers, which is part 2 of the Oresteia, this trilogy of plays that won the first prize at the city Dionysia in 458 BC. Before we move on to the second play, though, I want to talk about one thing that happens at the end in the fallout of the first play, and that is the entry of Aegisthus. Now, Aegisthus has been more of an idea than anything thus far. Just, he's the guy, remember, he's Agamemnon's cousin, because Agamemnon's father is Atreus. Atreus' brother is Thyestes. Thyestes was terribly wronged by Atreus in the battle over Argos, and Thyestes' son is Aegisthus. Aegisthus forms an adulterous relationship with Clytemnestra and conspires in the plot with her against Agamemnon. Now he comes on stage and we see him for real. And my take on Aegisthus in this trilogy, I think, is that Aeschylus kind of wants him to be just blandly loathsome. He wants him to be, he's far, far less charismatic and dynamic than Clytemnestra, but he also, for Orestes, who's going to be the son that needs to avenge his father's death, he's going to be this kind of presence that drives him into taking revenge. And this is very, very realistic, right? There's a certain kind of blandness of evil that can set your teeth on edge. And that's something that, draws you into this kind of just cycle of anger and retribution and guilt. I mean, this is something, like, for me, I've talked before about how Gavin Newsom fills me with rage. That's the current governor of California, up for recall currently. And just his sort of bland sort of self-confidence and arrogance as he destroys the state that he runs makes me furious, right? And that you can kind of see how Aegisthus would get on Orestes' nerves in exactly the same way. And so I wanted to read just his entry before we move on. So we'll start then with this Fagel's translation, and then I'm going to try a different translation so that you guys can hear the difference. But here's from Agamemnon at the end, the entry of Aegisthus. Oh, what a brilliant day it is for vengeance. Now I can say once more there are gods in heaven avenging men, blazing down on all the crimes of earth. Now at last I see this man brought down in the Furies' tangling robes. It feasts my eyes. He pays for the plot his father's hand contrived. Atreus, this man's father, was king of Argos. My father, Thyestes, let me make this clear, Atreus' brother challenged him for the crown, and Atreus drove him out of house and home, and lured him back, and home Thyestes came, poor man, a suppliant to his own hearth, to pray that fate might save him. So it did. There was no dying, no staining our native ground with his blood. Thyestes was the guest, and this man's godless father, the zeal of the host outstripping a brother's love, made my father a feast that seemed a feast for gods, a love feast of his children's flesh. He cuts the extremities, feet and delicate hands into small pieces, scatters them over the dish, and serves it to Thyestes throned on high. He picks at the flesh he cannot recognize, the soul of innocence eating the food of ruin. Look! That feeds upon the house, and then when he sees the monstrous thing he's done, he shrieks. He reels back head first and vomits up that butchery, tramples the feast, brings down the curse of justice, crash to ruin, all the race of Pleisthenes, crash down, so you see him down, and I, the weaver of justice, plotted out the kill. Atreus drove us into exile, my struggling father and I, a babe in arms, his last son, but I became a man, and justice brought me home. I was abroad, but I reached out and seized my man. Link by link, I clamped the fatal scheme together. Now I could die gladly, even I. Now I see this monster in the nets of justice. So this is actually a really good summary and reminder for us of where we got last week, right? We had this terrible crime committed by Atreus, father of Agamemnon. Now that crime has kind of begotten more crime. This theme of either doing terrible violence to children or wrapping them up, implicating them in your own grievances, your own needs, your own desires, self-serving violence to children is kind of this symbol of how we pass on our guilt from generation to generation. Aegisthus has brooded over this his whole life. His father Thyestes kind of taught him, raised him in this school of vengeance, and now this is what he thinks justice is. And the question of the plays from here on out is going to be, how do we work toward a better kind of justice? And we won't fully answer that question until the last play, which is the Eumenides. But this play, the Libation Bearers, this next second play that we're now going to start, kind of gets us some way to understanding what the problem is more deeply. I was so stoked when Mini Mustachery reached out to me to advertise on the show, because I was already using all of their stuff. If you are like me and you have a beard, you know it's not easy to keep it looking good. You have to make sure it doesn't get scraggly, that it smells nice, all of that stuff. And even if you don't have a beard, honestly, you got to keep yourself clean shaven and well groomed. Mini Mustachery is the one-stop shop to get all the best stuff for taking care of your facial needs if you're a dude. So they make everything. They make, these incredible beard waxes, balms, oils, conditioners, all in a bunch of different scents. I really love the Ragabrash scent, but they're all really good, and they're just high quality. You know how easy it is to buy something off of Amazon and just when you get it, it really doesn't work, and you have to buy a bunch of different stuff from different places. Mini Mustachery solves all of those problems. You go to minimustachery.com/heretics. Use the offer code heretics. You get 25% off everything in their store. Tons of stuff, right? Shampoos, combs, brushes, whatever. minimustachery.com/heretics. Use the offer code heretics to get 25% off. One more time, it's minimustachery.com/heretics and use the offer code heretics to fix your face. So now that we've moved on to the second play in the trilogy, I'm going to move on to a new translation, and that is the Richmond Lattimore translation. Now, I have a certain affection for Lattimore. I think he's I could broadly characterize him as a less poetic translator, less concerned with capturing things like rhythm than Fagles is. But Lattimore translated the Odyssey that I read. It was kind of my first introduction to Great Western literature when I was in 6th grade, and I remember lying on the floor of my grandparents' house and just enraptured by Lattimore's Odyssey. And so it's nice to read him again in this translation of the Libation Bearers. The first thing that happens, lights up, although there weren't actual stage lights, but starting the play, the first thing that happens is that Orestes shows up. And Orestes, remember, has been sent away. He's the son of Agamemnon, and he's been gotten out of the way so that Clytemnestra and Aegisthus could do the dirty deed of killing his father. And now he's come home, and he must avenge his father. I mean, there's just sort of no way out of this. He needs justice for the death of his father. And so the inciting incident of the play is his discovery that this is the case. So here he comes. He says, "Hermes, Lord of the dead, you who watch over the powers of my fathers, be savior and stand by my claim. Here is my own soil that I walk. I have come home, and by this mounded grave bank I invoke my father to hear, to listen. He met his end in violence through a woman's treacherous tricks. Here is a lock of hair for Inachus, who made me grow to manhood. Here a strand to mark my grief. I was not by, my father, to mourn for your death, nor stretched my hand out when they took your corpse away. But what can this mean that I see? This group that comes of women veiled in dignities of black. At what sudden occurrence can I guess? Is this some new wound struck into our house? I think they bring these urns to pour in my father's honor, to appease the powers below. Can I be right? Surely I think I see Electra, my own sister, walk in the bitter show of mourning. Zeus, Zeus, grant me vengeance for my father's murder. Stand and fight beside me of your grace. Pylades, stand we out of their way. So may I learn the meaning of these women, what their prayer would ask." So right off the bat here, we can see that something that distinguishes this middle play is its obsessive concern, its sincere concern with the gods. And in Agamemnon, the gods are much more kind of ambiguous. The chorus right at the beginning says, whichever, there's some god, we don't know, maybe Zeus is his name, maybe not, right? There's a kind of uncertainty about it. And it seems like the chaos of just being roiled up in this pure lust for vengeance is what really dominates that first play. Orestes is different. Orestes wants to get it right. He wants to do right by his father. He wants to honor the gods. He comes to the tomb of his father, having learned of his father's death at Clytemnestra's hands, with a sincere urge to follow the logic of what he believes is right. And so he believes that he and his buddy Pylades is it's one of the great bromances in all of Western literature. He and Pylades are going to stand aside and figure out what to do while Electra comes on with her chorus. And this is why the play is called The Libation Bearers, because Electra has been sent with this chorus of Asian women, serving women, to make a libation at Agamemnon's grave. And so here comes Electra, and she invokes Hermes as well. She does something quite similar. She says, "Attendant women who order our house, since you are with me in this supplication and escort me here, be also my advisers in this rite. What shall I say as I pour out these outpourings of sorrow? How say the good word? How make my prayer to my father? Shall I say I bring it to the man beloved from a loving wife, and mean my mother? I have not the daring to say this, nor know what else to say as I pour this liquid on my father's tomb. Shall I say this sentence, regular in human use? Grant good return to those who send to you these flowers of honor, gifts to match the evil they have done. Or, quiet and dishonored, as my father died, shall I pour out this offering for the ground to drink, and go, like one who empties garbage out of doors, and turn my eyes and throw the vessel far away. Dear friends, in this deliberation, stay with me. We hold a common hatred in this house. Do not for fear of any hide your thought inside your heart. The day of destiny waits for the free man as well as for the man enslaved beneath an alien hand. If you know any better course than mine, tell me." So we see how Clytemnestra's deed and her sort of obsession with her own grievance has wrapped up her children into this grim and kind of rancorous situation that Orestes is sort of yearning for justice, longing for justice. Electra is just feels helpless and hopeless, right? She has no idea what to do or where to go, and it's in this context that the two of them meet and form a plan. So that's kind of the setup of this play. And the way that Electra realizes this is kind of funny, and it was made fun of in antiquity, that Electra sees the footprint of Orestes and her foot sort of fits in it, which is not at all how brothers and sisters are related to one another physically, but it's a dramatic device for her to figure out that this is what's going on. So here's what she says. "The bitter wash has surged upon my heart as well. I am struck through as by the cross stab of a sword, and from my eyes the thirsty and unguarded drops burst in a storm of tears like winter rain as I look on this strand of hair." Remember, Orestes left his strand of hair for Inachus at the gravesite. He says, "How could I think some other man, one of the citizens, could ever be lord of hair like this? She never would have cut it, she who murdered him is my mother, but no mother in her heart which has assumed God's hate and hates her children. No, and yet, how can I say in open outright confidence, this is a treasured token from the best beloved of men to me, Orestes? Does hope fawn on me? Ah, I wish it had the kind voice of a messenger, so that my mind would not be torn in two, I not shaken, but it could tell me plain to throw this strand away as trash, if it was cut from a hated head, or like a brother could have mourned with me, and been a treasured splendor for my father and his grave. The gods know, and we call upon the gods. They know how we are spun in circles like seafarers in what storms. But if we are to win and our ship live, from one small seed could burgeon an enormous tree. But see, here is another sign. Footprints are here. The feet that made them are alike and look like mine. There are two sets of footprints, of the man who gave his hair and one who shared the road with him. I step where he has stepped, and heel marks, and the space between his heel and toe are like the prints I make. Oh, this is torment, and my wits are going." So you notice that Lattimore is, I think, a more straightforward translator. He's still translating in rhythm, but he's not giving us quite the same play with rhythm that echoes the way the Greek is reproduced. And one thing that does is it makes the English a little bit more straightforward. And there are pluses and minuses to this. A straightforward delivery of these passionate lines, right, sometimes allows us to feel them more deeply because they're so understated. I prefer the Fagles approach, right, because I love seeing what he does to capture the rhythms of the Greek. And it's not as if Lattimore doesn't do that. I just don't think he quite devotes so much focus to it. But these are the kinds of things, often people ask me about translation. These are the kinds of things you can pay attention to. If you don't speak the original language, you can still feel, what is the effect of this work on me? And do I think that that's what it was supposed to be, right? Do I think that that's the effect it would have had on its original listeners? And so this kind of funny device occurs. I mean, the hair is vaguely makes a certain degree of sense. I guess you could recognize a lock of somebody's hair, but the foot thing is really kind of silly. And she notices also that Pylades is there with him, or that somebody else is there with Orestes. And so they meet together and they hatch this plot for what they're going to do. Folks, I really want to stress to you that you need ExpressVPN. The internet is becoming a scary place. ExpressVPN is how you protect yourself against people that want to use you essentially as a commodity, as a product. And one of the things that they love to sell is your IP address. Data harvesters use your IP to uniquely identify you and your location. And let me tell you, you do not want the people who run big tech knowing where you are and who you are. So with ExpressVPN, whenever I use it, which is always, my connection gets rerouted through an encrypted server and my IP address is masked. Super, super easy to turn on no matter what device you're using, phone, laptop, smart TV, whatever. And they give you a random IP address shared by other ExpressVPN customers. So it's a kind of I am Spartacus moment, right? You are shrouded by them, and you are protected then from data brokers. So if you're like me and you think this is one of the major battles for us to fight going forward, then visit expressvpn.com/heretics and you'll get 3 extra months for free. expressvpn.com/heretics, expressvpn.com/heretics to get protected and get 3 months for free. Okay. So here comes Orestes. He says to Electra, "Pray for what is to come and tell the gods that they have brought your former prayers to pass. Pray for success." Electra says, "Upon what ground? What have I won yet from the gods?" This is stichomythia. I was talking about this in the previous episode. It's an interaction that happens line by line between characters. She says, "Upon what ground? What have I won yet from the gods?" Orestes says, "You have come in sight of all you long since prayed to see." Electra, "How do you know what man was subject of my prayer?" Orestes says, "I know about Orestes, how he stirred your heart." Electra, "Yes, but how am I given to answer my prayers?" Orestes, "Look at me. Look for no one closer to you than I." Electra, "Is this some net of treachery you catch me in, stranger?" Orestes, "Then I must be contriving plots against myself." Electra, "It is your pleasure to laugh at my unhappiness." Orestes, "I only mock my own then if I laugh at you." Electra, "Are you really Orestes? Can I call you by that name?" Orestes says, "You see my actual self and are slow to learn, and yet you saw this strand of hair I cut in sign of grief and shuddered with excitement, for you thought you saw me, and again when you were measuring my tracks. Now lay the severed strand against where it was cut, and see how well your brother's hair matches my head. Look at this piece of weaving, the work of your hand with its blade strokes and figure design of beasts. No, no, control yourself and do not lose your head for joy. I know those nearest to us hate us bitterly." Now this is in some sense a kind of standard thing that happens in tragedy and in drama generally, right? You have a mistaken identity or an unknown identity, and then you have the meeting of the character that's been longing for this other character but can't yet believe or know or understand that this is who this is. So on one level, right, that's a standard trope. But one of the things that great artists do is they take standard tropes and they invest them with deeper significance and deeper meaning. We have this sort of false assumption that if there's a very structured form, like in tragedy has very structured forms and kinds of scenes and everything, that means that artists can't be creative. But in fact, structure and form gives the artists the backdrop against which to be creative. It's like a kind of, it's like a scaffolding that you can climb around and do tricks on, right? And that's what Aeschylus Aeschylus is doing here, because in many, many ways, this is a kind of dark and twisted version of a coming-of-age story in which Orestes comes into his own and in some sense realizes who he is. And so all this play on words, right, that, I know that you're looking for Orestes, and well, I'm Orestes, right? Who is Orestes, right? What is he going to be? Who is he going to be in light of this broken past? And we all, on some level, come up against this question as we come of age, because we all, as I said last week, are born into a broken world. And so one of the questions on the table for every one of us in some way or another is, I was wronged in this way by my parents. I was, dealt this bad hand by fate. Maybe I was born poor, or maybe I was, born in some terrible situation. And these are the situations that people point to now when they make calls for things like reparations. They say, well, the world is still broken in this unfair way, so that some people are born poor and some people are born rich and all this stuff. Now, for one thing, I want to note that the racialization of that narrative is kind of inaccurate, in part because there are plenty of people who are born into terrible poverty who are not Black, even though there are many Black people who are born into poverty and fatherlessness, right? I mean, that's another theme of this play. And you carry that burden with you. There's no question about it. There's nothing fair about it. But the question that you're faced with then is, how am I going to react, and who am I going to be? And Orestes wants to be noble and valiant, but he's hobbled by the fact that all of his models are evil, right? That Agamemnon is kind of self-obsessed, and Clytemnestra is a murderess, right? And so he's stumbling his way toward virtue. And really the tragedy of this play is that he doesn't have any good way to conceive of that, to think his way out of it. And his invocation of the gods is like a kind of cry for help from outside of this system, right? And that's ultimately going to be the resolution of this trilogy. And this trilogy has what you might call a kind of happy ending. But we're not there yet. But I just wanted to point out, right, that one of the things Aeschylus brilliantly observes is that in order to break free of this generational cycle of guilt and violence, you have to make appeal to something from outside of you, something from outside this broken human world where everybody is guilty. That's why retribution and blood guilt doesn't work. It's because all the people who are perpetrating it are themselves implicated in it. And this reference to heaven that comes in the second play is kind of like the point that I made at the very beginning last week, that Anton says, well, in the stories from the Bible where this happens, it's God who's making the commandment, and God stands outside, right, and can evaluate things without implication in it, because he is pure and he is beyond sin and stain, right? So this is a kind of analogous pagan version of that, that Orestes is yearning, reaching out for some logic of justice outside of the one that he's kind of wrapped up in himself. And it's an amazing and painful and heartbreaking struggle to watch, which you see in Friends all the time, right? You see people trying to be better than the sins of their father, right? And that's, the first noble instinct of humanity reaching out to God that gets us one step away from the terrible cycle that the House of Atreus is caught in here. And so that's what's happening in the Oresteia, but the Oresteia is still a tragedy, and it doesn't quite work out in this play. So what happens next? Orestes and Electra hatch their plan. Electra says, "O dearest, treasured darling of my father's house, hope of the seed of our salvation, wept for, trust your strength of hand, and win your father's house again. O bright beloved presence, you bring back 4 lives to me. To call you father is constraint of fact, and all the love I could have borne my mother turns your way, while she is loathed as she deserves. My love for a pitilessly slaughtered sister turns to you, and now you were my steadfast brother after all. You alone bring me honor, but may force and right and Zeus Almighty, third with them, be on your side." And that's a wonderful speech, because it shows that, yes, like all of these terrible things have been done. And now, and this happens with, new generations, that every new soul is the world made new. And so Electra sees Orestes and she invests all of her disappointed hopes in her mother, in her sister, in her father, in him. An enormous amount of pressure, of course, for him to bear. And he's going to buckle under it in a certain way, I think. But he's also, I think, think, going to prove, with the help of the gods, that he can make his way out of it. So here's Orestes. Zeus gaze. See, again, he's always invoking the gods, right? Zeus gaze on all that we try to do. Behold, the orphaned children of the eagle father, now that he has died entangled in the twisting coils of the deadly viper, and the young he left behind are worn with the wasting of starvation, not full grown, to bring home to their nest the prey as their father did. I, with my sister, whom I name, Electra here, stand in your sight, children whose father is lost. We both are driven in exile from the house that should be ours. If you destroy these fathers' fledglings who gave you sacrifice and high honor, from what hand like his shall you be given the sacred feast which is your right? Destroy the eagle's brood, and you have no more means to send your signs to mortals for their strong belief, nor, if the stump rot through on this our royal tree, shall it sustain your altars on sacrificial days. Safe keep it. From a little thing you can raise up a house to grandeur, though it now seem overthrown. This is an appeal, by the way, that you find also a lot in the Hebrew Bible, right? What profit is it to thee, God, if I go down into the pit? Who then will give you sacrifice, right? Sort of save me for your name's sake, essentially. And this is similar impulse here from Orestes. The chorus says, O children, silence, saviors of your father's house, be silent, children, otherwise someone may hear, and for mere love of gossip carry news of all you do to those in power, to those I long to see someday as corpses in the bubbling pitch and flame. Now, these are captive women, right? Slave women, and so they are totally on board with the project of killing their evil mistress, Clytemnestra. Orestes says, the big strength of Apollo's oracle will not forsake me. I like that. That's a very kind of Latimorian blunt. The big strength of Apollo's oracle will not forsake me. For he charged me to win through this hazard with divination of much and speech articulate, warning of chill disaster under my warm heart, were I to fail against my father's murderers, told me to cut them down in their own fashion, turn to bull-like fury in the loss of my estates. He said that else I must myself pay penalty with my own life, and suffer much grim punishment, spoke of the angers that come out of the ground from those beneath who turn against men, spoke of sicknesses, ulcers that ride upon the flesh and cling, and with wild teeth eat away the natural tissue, how on this disease shall grow in turn a leprous fur. He spoke of other ways, again, by which the avengers might attack, brought to fulfillment from my father's blood. There's a dark weapon of those dead men underground. All those within my family who fell turn to call upon me, madness and empty terror in the night. On one who sees those visions in the dark, they tear him loose and shake him until, with all his body degraded by the collar of bronze, he flees his city. And such as he can have no share in the communal bowl allowed them, no cup filled for friends to drink, the wrath of the Father comes unseen on them to drive them back from altars. None can take them in or shelter them, dishonored and unloved. By all the man must die at last, shrunken and wasted away in painful death. Shall I not trust such oracles as this? Even if I do not trust them, here is work that must be done. Here numerous desires converge to drive me on, the gods' urgency and grief for my father, and with these the loss of my estates wears hard on me. Also the thought that these my citizens, most high renowned of men, who toppled Troy with hearts of valor, must go subject to this pair of women, since his heart is really female, or if not, that soon will show. So another amazing speech. They come thick and fast at the beginning of this play. Really, the opening is, to me, what puts the matter in stark, clear terms. And the matter is this: Orestes is the pivotal figure in this question of what's going to happen to a house caught up in blood guilt. On one level, we can see how terribly he's haunted by the son's need to avenge the father, and he feels that there is something urgent in the divine mandate to do that. He's received an oracle from Apollo, which says that you must avenge your father's death, and that, I think, is taken in the play as a truth. That is that this crime, this murder, needs to be avenged, and in the system that currently exists, Orestes is the one to do it. He's the son. He's the bright hope of the future of the house. But the question is, how is he going to do it without becoming caught up in just the same cycle of violence and retribution, right? And he's not embittered in the way that Clytemnestra was. He does have a sense of honor. He has a sense of responsibility and duty, and yet his duty is a terrible thing, and that's to kill his mother. Folks, you may have seen me post that I am buying a house, which I'm super excited about. And you can bet that 100% of my kitchen goods are going to be from Public Goods. They're a great company. I really love the stuff that they make because it's so free of like additives and gross preservatives and whatever. It's really important to know what's in your products, where they come from. A lot of stuff you get at the grocery store these days has gross additives. I'm a health nut. I think we all should care about what we put in our body, what we use, and Public Goods is a wonderful place to go for that. Everything is very clean. The packaging looks great in my kitchen. They make a ton of basics. I really like their dish soap, looks great on my sink. But the food is good too. There's ramen and nuts. And actually, my cat really loves the freeze-dried duck nibs, which I keep mentioning because I just have to get it right. I have to say it right. There's a bunch of essentials, coffee, soaps, all of that stuff. Right now, if you go to publicgoods.com/heretics, you can get $15 off your first order with no minimum purchase. That means free stuff. publicgoods.com/heretics, or use heretics as an offer code at checkout, and you'll get $15 off. That's free stuff. Free freeze-dried duck nibs, free soap, free food, free tea, free anything at publicgoods.com/heretics. All right. So this is the terrible task in front of Orestes, is to avenge his father's death. He doesn't know how he can do it without killing his mother. He knows of no other way, right? This is the genius of the play, is that up until this kind of hinge point in the trilogy, he has no other model for how justice can be done. He only knows about blood feuds and murder. And so he receives this oracle from Apollo that you must avenge your father, and he thinks, well, all I can do is kill my mother. And he hatches this plot. He appears, masquerades as a stranger, and really the climax of this play is the interaction between Orestes and his mother. It's really poignant. Clytemnestra emerges from the palace. She says, "Friends, tell me only what you would have, and it is yours. We have all comforts that go with a house like ours, hot baths and beds to charm away your weariness, with rest and the regard of honest eyes. But if you have some higher business, more a matter of state, that is the men's concern, and I will tell them of it." Orestes, masquerading, right, as an unknown stranger, he says, "I am a Daulian stranger out of Focus. As I traveled with my pack and my own following, making for Argos, where my feet are rested now, I met a man I did not know, nor did he know me, but he asked what way I took, and told me his. It was a Phocian, Strophius, for he told me his name and said, 'Friend, since in any case you make for Argos, remember carefully to tell Orestes' parents that he is dead. Please do not let it slip your mind.'" Now, Strophius, remember, is the one that they had sent Orestes to get him out of the way. And he makes up this story now that Orestes is dead, right? "Please do not let it slip your mind. Then if his people decide to have him brought back home or bury him where he went to live, all outlander forever, carry their requests again to me. For as it is, the bronze walls of an urn close in the ashes of a man who has been deeply mourned. So much I know, no more. But whether I now talk with those who have authority and concern in this, I do not know. I think his father should be told." It's kind of poignant because it's the trick, it's the trap, but it's also Orestes is now going to see how his mother will react to his death. He knows his mother wanted him out of the way. Now he's going to see whether that goes so far as to be unmoved by his death. Clytemnestra instead says, "Ah me, you tell us how we are stormed from head to heel. Oh, curse upon your house, bitter antagonist, how far your eyes range. What was clean out of your way, your archery brings down with a distant deadly shot, to strip unhappy me of all I ever loved. Even Orestes now, he was so well advised to keep his foot clear of this swamp of death, but now set down as traitor the hope that was our healer once, and made us look for a bright revel in our house." Now, we know from the Agamemnon that Clytemnestra is very tricksy and can use words to her advantage, so we're not totally prepared to trust her in this show of mourning, but it does make things much more poignant and pathetic in the sense of pathos for Orestes, who is committed to killing her, right? He says, "I could have wished, with hosts so prosperous as you, to have made myself known by some more gracious news, and so been entertained by you. For what is there more kindly than the feeling between host and guest? Yet it had been abuse of duty in my heart, had I not given so great a matter to his friends, being so bound by promise and the stranger's rights. Clytemnestra, you shall not find that your reception falls below your worth, nor be any the less our friend for this. Some other would have brought this news in any case, but it is the hour for travelers who all day have trudged the long road to be given the rest that they deserve." All right, so now that's the setup. They go into the house. Aegisthus comes on stage. And remember that all murders happen offstage, and so this is a kind of way to reveal this in a dramatic way. Aegisthus says, "It is not without summons that I come, but called by messenger, with news that there are strangers here arrived, telling a story that brings no delight, the death of Orestes. For our house, already bitten and poisoned, to take this new load upon itself would be a thing of dripping fear and blood. Yet how shall I pass upon these rumors as the living truth? For messages made out of women's terror leap high in the upward air and empty die. Do you know anything of this by which to clear my mind?" Chorus leader says, "We heard, yes, but go on inside and hear it from the strangers. Messengers are never quite so sure as a man's questions answered by the men themselves." Remember, the chorus is in on the plot here. Aegisthus, "I wish to question carefully this messenger, and learn if he himself was by when the man died, or if he heard but some blind rumor and so speaks. The mind has eyes, not to be easily deceived." Chorus chanting, "Zeus, Zeus, what shall I say, where make a beginning of prayer for the gods' aid? My will is good, but how shall I speak to match my need?" Note, again, the chorus more sincere about the gods, right, than the chorus of elders in Agamemnon. The bloody edges of the knives that rip man flesh are moving to work. It will mean utter and final ruin imposed on Agamemnon's house, or our man will kindle a flame and light of liberty, win the domain and huge treasure again of his father's forlorn challenger, though blessed by God. Orestes must come to grips with two, so wrestle. Yet may he throw them. Listen, it goes. But how? What has been done within the house? Chorus leader says, "Stand we aside until the work is done, for so we shall not seem to be accountable in this foul business, for the fight is done, the issue drawn." Then enters a follower of Aegisthus. Follower says, "O sorrow, all is sorrow for our stricken lord. Raise up again a triple cry of sorrow, for Aegisthus lives no longer. Open there, open quick as you may, and slide back the door bars on the women's gates. It will take the strength of a young arm, but not to fight for one who is dead and done for. What use there? Ho there, ho! My cry is to the deaf, and I babble in vain, at sleepers to no purpose. Clytemnestra, where is she? Does what? Her neck is on the razor's edge, and ripe for lopping, as she did to others before." So the question that the chorus has raised is, will Orestes save us all, or will he just, bring the house to yet further ruin and destruction? Or will Clytemnestra triumph? So Clytemnestra enters. "What is this, and why are you shouting in the house?" Follower, "I tell you, the living are being killed by the dead ones," because Orestes was thought to be dead, right? So Orestes has emerged. In fact, he's real. Clytemnestra, "Ah, so you speak in riddles, but I read the rhyme. We have been won with the treachery by which we slew. Bring me quick somebody an axe to kill a man." So now we have the answer. How does Clytemnestra feel about Orestes? Well, she wants an axe to kill him. And we shall see if we can beat him before we go down. So far gone are we in this wretched fight. Enter Orestes and Pylades from the palace with swords drawn. Orestes, "You next. The other one in there has had enough. Beloved, strong Aegisthus, are you dead indeed?" Orestes, "You love your man, then. You shall lie in the same grave with him and never be unfaithful even in death." Clytemnestra, "Hold, my son. Oh, take pity, child, before this breast, where many a time, a drowsing baby, you would feed and with soft gums sucked in the milk that made you strong." It's really dark, right? She's just called for an axe to kill him. And now she's baring her breasts to him and invoking really the tenderest and most primordial feeling that you can invoke for a man, and that is his love for his mother, right? Men honor their mother highly just by nature. And so despite the fact that Clytemnestra has become a thoroughgoing, scheming fiend at this point, she invokes her motherhood at this pivotal moment. Orestes, "What shall I do, Pylades? Be shamed to kill my mother?" Pylades, "What then becomes thereafter of the oracles declared by Loxias at Pytho?" That's Apollo's oracle, right? "What of sworn oaths? Count all men hateful to you rather than the gods." Orestes, "I judge that you win. Your advice is good." Pylades really hits the nose on the head here, right? And this is the true dilemma that he's in. He knows that he must avenge his father. He doesn't know any other way to do it than this. He's confronted with the horror of it. He knows that there's something just, deeply at some primordial base level wrong. And yet he knows he also, or feels he must do it. Orestes to Clytemnestra, "Come here. My purpose is to kill you over his body. You thought him bigger than my father while he lived. Die then, and sleep beside him, since he is the man you love, and he you should have loved got only your hate." Clytemnestra, "I raised you when you were little. May I grow old with you." What a line. "May I grow old with you." Orestes, "You killed my father. Would you make your home with me?" Clytemnestra, "Destiny had some part in that, my child." Orestes, "Why then, destiny has worked this death for you as well." Clytemnestra, "A mother has her curse, child. Are you not afraid?" Orestes, no, you bore me and threw me away to a hard life. Clytemnestra, I sent you to a friend's house. This was no throwing away. Orestes, I was born of a free father. You sold me. Clytemnestra, so where then is the price that I received from you? Orestes, I could say it would be indecent to tell you. Clytemnestra, if you do, tell also your father's follies. Orestes, blame him not. He suffered while you were sitting here at home. Clytemnestra, it hurts women to be kept from their men, my child. Orestes, the man's hard work supports the women who sit at home. Clytemnestra, I think, child, that you mean to kill your mother. Orestes, no, it will be you who kill yourself. It will not be I. Clytemnestra, take care. Your mother's curse, like dogs, will drag you down. Orestes, how shall I escape my father's curse if I fail here? Clytemnestra, I feel like one who wastes live tears upon a tomb. Orestes, yes, this is death, your wages for my father's fate. Clytemnestra, you are the snake I gave birth to and gave the breast. Orestes, indeed, the terror of those dreams saw things to come clearly. You killed, and it was wrong. Now suffer wrong. And they take her into the palace, and we know what's going to happen next. It's probably my favorite exchange in all of surviving Greek tragedy, because the whole, Clytemnestra is, writhing, sort of squirming around, trying to find some way to save her own life, right? And it's not that we particularly have any love for her or feel as if she deserves pity, but we also feel that, that there's pathos to many of the things that she's saying, as indicated before, right? The death of Iphigenia was terrible. She did suffer a terrible wrong. She's let it consume her and destroy her, but she's still the guy's mother. And Orestes, right, is caught in this bind, right? That a mother's curse has power, and yet also Apollo's curse has power, right? And Apollo has commanded him to avenge his father. And he's trapped. There's no way out. And so really this drives the thing to a head. It shows us the unanswerable question. Within this system, something about this system of blood guilt has to change because it's caught this good man in a vice. And the tragedy of the libation bearers is that he has no way out of that vice. And so he takes her in and he kills her. And the last thing that happens as a genius ending is he sees the Furies, the goddesses of vengeance, coming for him. So I'll read the last speech and then I'll tell you what we're in for next week. So Orestes says to the chorus, I would have you know I see not how this thing will end. I am a charioteer whose course is wrenched outside the track, for I am beaten. My rebellious senses bolt with me headlong, and the fear against my heart is ready for the singing and dance of wrath. But while I hold some grip still on my wits, I say publicly to my friends, I killed my mother, not without some right. My father's murder stained her, and the gods disgust. As for the spell that charmed me to such daring, I cite above all the seer of Pytho, Loxias. He declared I could do this and not be charged with wrong, while if I refused the punishment I will not speak. No archery could hit such height of agony, and look upon me now, how I go armored in, leafed branch and garland on my way to the center stone and sanctuary, and Apollo's sacred ground, the shining of the fabulous fire that never dies, to escape this blood that is my own. Loxias ordained that I should turn me to no other shrine than this. To all men of Argos in time to come, I say, they shall be witnesses how these evil things were done. I go, an outcast wanderer from this land, and leave behind in life, in death, the name of what I did. Chorus leader says, no, what you did was well done. Remember that the chorus is in favor of this. Do not therefore bind your mouth to foul speech. Keep no evil on your lips. You liberated all the Argive city when you lopped the heads of these two snakes with one clean stroke. Orestes, no, women who serve this house, they come like Gorgons. They wear robes of black, and they are wreathed in a tangle of snakes. I can no longer stay. This is where we start to see the vision of the Furies that only he can see. Chorus leader, Orestes, dearest to your father of all men, what fancies whirl you hold? Do not give way to fear. Orestes, these are no fancies of affliction. They are clear and real, and here the bloodhounds of my mother's hate. Chorus leader, it is the blood still wet upon your hands that makes this shaken turbulence be thrown upon your sense. Orestes, ah, Lord Apollo, how they grow and multiply, repulsive for the blood drops of their dripping eyes. Chorus leader, there is one way to make you clean. Let Loxias touch you and set you free from these disturbances. Orestes, you cannot see them, but I see them. I am driven from this place. I can stay here no longer. And with that cliffhanger, we are going to leave it. We will ask the question next week, how is this impossible situation to be resolved? And that is the question that we are faced with, right? How is this impossible situation that historic wrong exists, that the country which we love and which is good and which was founded well, nevertheless has also done wrong, because all men do wrong, and there is now a call for blood guilt, a howling in the streets for retribution. How do we resolve this problem? Orestes, the libation bearer, shows us that we can't do it by just participating in the same cycle of violence, and there must be some force from outside that can resolve this impossible dispute between killing your mother and avenging your father, between righting the wrongs of the past and committing wrong yourself. All right, let's do the mailbag. You still have an opportunity to get the hottest shirt of the summer, but they are going fast. If you go to youngheretics.com/shop, you will find our Lifting is Infrastructure t-shirt with sleeves personally ripped by me. I am seeing a ton of Instagram stories from you guys wearing these to the gym, looking hella fly, getting swole AF. They are incredible, but they're only a limited run. Once they're gone, they're gone. We only made 200 of these. They're going fast. They're at youngheretics.com/shop. So go there now and get yours today. Mailbag questions come to me through Locals. Locals is a platform created by my buddy Dave Rubin, who was recently unfairly suspended from Twitter, proving his point that we need a place where nobody owns the relationship and the communities that we build. I founded the Young Heretics community to make that happen for us, for those of us who love the West, who love talking about it. VIPs on Locals get a ton of extra content, and we get to talk together about how our lives can reflect the best of what the West has to offer. They also get to be in the mailbag. So go to youngheretics.com/locals if you want in on all that. This is a question from Jared. As far as I could see, the Ancient Language Institute doesn't offer courses in Hebrew, which I would consider to be one of the essential languages of Western civilization. Well, first of all, I need to correct you, because the Ancient Language Institute is adding Biblical Hebrew this fall semester. And so one more time, you should go to ancientlanguage.com/heretics and sign up for that. But to the broader question, right, is Hebrew part of a classical education? The answer is yes. And it used to be standard that if you studied classics, that meant you studied Latin, Greek, and Hebrew, because we had this kind of fusion of our two pillars of the West, Athens and Jerusalem. The pagan antiquity, that is Roman and Greek, philosophy, history, and poetry, literature, right? That was thought to have been enlightened and shown in full truth by Scripture and the Bible. And so if you read Greek, Latin, and Hebrew, then you can read the whole Bible, and you can read the great works of the Greco-Roman West. I'm going to talk a lot next week about how the conclusion to the Oresteia basically prefigures and foreshadows what would eventually be salvation by Christ, which cancels out all blood debt and is the final answer to why we must not engage in the kind of thing that they did back in the time of Saul, right? Which was how we began this whole thing, right? With Saul, for the evil of Saul, innocent men had to die, essentially. Why does that not happen? The final answer, in my view, is Jesus Christ. But I also believe that answer is prefigured in the Oresteia and in a whole range of other classical texts, especially some of the stuff that Plato writes in the Republic. And so the reason why Biblical Hebrew must be, if we're to fully understand the West, it must be considered a classical language, is because you don't get that full picture. It's like a stereoopticon, which is where you layer two things on top of one another, and then you see in 3D, right? So Greek and Latin have now been kind of cut off from that as this sort of secular discipline of classics. But it wasn't always that way. It wasn't that way among the colonists who founded a lot of America's first and greatest universities, and it shouldn't be that way today. So one more time, the Ancient Language Institute does now offer Biblical Hebrew, and you should consider it just as much a classical language as Greek and Latin. All right, thank you, Jared, for that question. Thanks for being Young Heretics VIP. One more time, if you want to join us on Locals, go to youngheretics.com/locals. I will see you again next week. If you like this show, you will love the Claremont Institute. That's where I work. We put out two publications, the Claremont Review of Books, which is a quarterly magazine, and the American Mind, which is online. Both of them are very important, I think, publications in the fight to recover American ideals. You can donate to Claremont by going to claremont.org/donate and let them know in the notes that you heard about us through Young Heretics. All right, folks, the thrilling conclusion next week, and more truth, beauty, and the stuff that matters.